Selamat malam Sobat Justicia, Viva Justicia, Sobat Kanal Pengetahuan Fakultas Hukum UGM. Malam ini kita berjumpa lagi untuk Distinguished Guest Speaker Program yang diinisiasi oleh International Association for Law Schools, di mana Fakultas Hukum UGM menjadi salah satu bagian. Dan memang untuk program kali ini ada kesempatan dari US Environmental Protection Agency, and once again we have already joined with us Miss Jocelyn Piero, Dr. Jocelyn Piero. She is a toxicologist from US EPA. And then good afternoon and good morning, Jocelyn. It's very nice to have you again right now. And tonight's topic will be quite significant for us today. I mean, to consider the condition, the existing condition in Indonesia, that we have this omnibus law already implemented. Already promulgated, not yet initiated, not yet implemented, but this will cause problems in the relation between public policy, and the law on environmental issues. And right now, tonight, Ms. Jocelyn will have a discussion about the topic of environmental law and public policy relation, particularly in US and to some extent to other case. And I think we can have discussion on what would be that case if we brought to Indonesian level. So I think that's from the introduction, because we already have a fruitful discussion last week, and I think I will give all the time to Ms. Jocelyn to share with us about this topic. Okay, so please, Jocelyn.
Okay. Let's see when I'm getting the PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. Okay. So, like you were saying, I'm Dr. Jocelyn Piero. I have previous experience in public policy, helping to write public policy, as well as regulations for laws. And for my master's degree, I mastered in public affairs with the focus on environmental policy and natural resource management. And so because of that, I'm able to talk about this based on my experience. Today, we'll be going over a lot of just like the basics of what policy and law are, so that we can see how they intersect and the differences between them. So policy is the outlines of what a government is going to do and what it can achieve for the society as a whole. Policy also means what a government does not intend to do. It also evolves the principles that are needed for achieving the goal. Policies are only documents and not laws, but these policies can lead to new laws. Whereas laws are set standards, principles, and procedures that must be followed in society. Law is mainly made for implementing justice in the society. There are various types of laws, framed like criminal laws, civil laws, and international laws. While a law is framed for bringing justice to the society, a policy is framed for achieving certain goals.
Bagaimana? Saya belum jelasin Pak bagaimana? Aldehe.
Is there a question?
No, just some interruption. Sorry, Jocelyn, about that.
Okay. Okay. So, legislation.
Oh, Mama.
Legislation is passed in the legislature by a vote. from elected officials. Policy is written by unelected policy servants. So people like me who work for a government agency, we're the ones that write the policies. If you break a policy, there are no legal or criminal consequences. If you break legislation, laws, and regulations, you are potentially liable for criminal or civil damages. Policies flow from laws and regulations and legislation. Legislation, an example would be children are legally required to attend school, and policy is the how. Because children are legally required to attend school, schools must be built in every town and city. So it's the how to achieve that goal that the law had established. So here is the typical order of laws and policies, from the most broadly influential laws to the most specific, and policies to the most specific policies also. So we start with international law. That laws that are established at the international law, such as we talked about the Basel Convention for environmental laws related to hazardous material management, that's the international law that is over any federal law or legislation related to the hazardous waste transportation between countries. And then there's provincial or state law legislation. And then after that, there's a regulation. And a regulation, it breaks down the exact details of what the law means and how it can be enforced. And it's also enforceable. And then there's municipal bylaw, and then that's followed by policy. So policy really, it can come after each of these steps because it's helping to achieve these goals. So it's not just number 6, it can also be number 4 because, well, or number 5 more likely, because it helps to achieve the laws at every level. There's policies for international laws, there's policy for federal laws, policies for state laws, because they're helping to achieve those goals that the laws set out. And then there's procedure, and then there's standard operating procedure, which is very specific about how to carry out the policies. Oh, and so each layer can influence every layer above it or below it. I mean, so international influence is federal, but no layer above it. So procedure won't influence policy. Policy will influence procedure, though. Provincial legislation must be compliant with existing federal legislation. Procedures must adhere to what their policies propose. What we might observe is that the lower into the structure we go, the more focused the scope and the more granular the work. It would be inappropriate for federal legislation to state how many windows a classroom must have, but that doesn't mean that it is not a topic worth codifying and discussing, possibly in a standard operating procedure. So very specific is where we're at when we're towards the bottom. To use an extreme example, if international law states that torture is illegal, and it does, it is illegal for a country to sanction torture within its borders. However, it would be just as illegal for infrastructure to develop a policy that involves torture, because policies must be compliant within all the legal structures that support their governments. So for us in the United States, we also have federal laws regarding clean water and clean air. And those laws however strict they are, the states must be at least that strict. However, states can be even more strict. California tends to have stricter laws about air policies than the US federal government, and they're allowed to do that, but there's a minimum that all states must have. Okay. Law and public policies aren't created in a vacuum, which has become a common theme, and nor are they a mere byproduct of legislatures passing a detailed law. Accordingly, legal scholars need to understand that there are politics that are involved with the creation of laws and policies. And especially laws, because they're from elected officials, are politicians essentially, those laws are influenced by politics. And since policies flow out of laws, there's politics involved that influence policies as well. The political scientist needs to know that there is the previous case law that has stated how policies should be created, and court rulings that affect how the policies and laws are crafted. If the two fields were able to come together and better understand each other, then the thorough studies and different laws will be better, and they will have a greater impact on the people of a nation. So just looking at policy, and here we're talking about public policy in government, because there's other policies that nonprofits and industry have for themselves. For the government to govern the people, the government needs to create different policies. Accordingly, the government has created many various agencies to help administer their specific areas. And these various agencies then construct these policies that they will eventually enforce. And when we say enforce, it's because the policies are based on law. So it's by the law that they're able to enforce them. So here at the EPA, some of the policy I worked on, it was for polychlorinated biphenyls. And while they have been illegal since the 80s, there's still some grandfathered in PCBs. And the grandfathered in ones, we were writing new policies on how to continue to get them out of the environment and how to get them out of, so some of them were in cars. So we worked on how to get them out of the part of the car and to move away from that and replace it. And so, like, it was illegal to have them, but at the same time, it was policy-wise legal grandfathered in because they had already been out in the open and they had already been in the cars. So we needed to figure out a way to help get them out of the cars and different things like that. And agencies, so I work for the Environmental Protection Agency. So we deal with environmental policies. And there's also commonly health agencies. We have an ocean and atmospheric agency. So all of these agencies have specific policies that they help to write and create, and the laws that are associated with them are what they enforce. So looking at your career options, in many career paths, one may find a lot of intersections of the work between policy and law. Others may find that having a legal background to be beneficial for policy work, while others can do policy work without the legal education. In a US News article, Policy Careers, an Option for Law School Grads, The article illuminates the fact that although it is not mandatory to graduate from law school in order to work at a policy organization, experts say law school graduates have a key advantage when competing for policy positions. So some of the positions that are available for lawyers who want to do policy, and also for environmental scientists who want to do policy, because I know some of you are environmental scientists too. And in policy, we need scientists so that they can make sense of the laws technically, to technically explain, okay, when it says PCBs, what type of PCB is that? In what form is the PCB bad? And when do we need to regulate it most? So in the cars, it wasn't regulated as harshly because it was encased in the light, and so it wouldn't get out very easily. So it wasn't being transferred around like it was with the electricity boxes, where it was leaking out, and so they really wanted to get rid of that. But when it was encased in the light, it was like, okay, if we're going to enforce, we don't want to, like, let's enforce the big stuff first, and then the smaller stuff, we'll get to that. And so as a policymaker, understanding the science behind these things is also important. Policymaking, it includes lots of different fields: scientists, lawyers, some politicians sometimes who also work for policy, financial individuals are important, statisticians. I did some statistics with the work that I was doing due to my statistical background. It's all needed. And so there's a lot of place for policy making. So some of the options are government agency policy maker, a lobbyist, policy analyst, public policy manager, attorney at a nonprofit, Congress, public policy advocacy, law enforcement, and think tanks. All of these can be involved in public policy. They influence different things. So how is a nonprofit involved? With my work, we had to listen to the feedback of industry and nonprofit on the policy formation process that we were doing. So we'd write regulations and then policy, and we'd wait for comments to come back. And we would get like thousands of comments on, oh, this is ridiculous because of this, or this is great, blah, blah, blah. And then big industry or nonprofit would be saying, oh, can we meet with you to discuss this? And those are the policymakers who come in and suggest constructive policies that can be made. So there are advantages and disadvantages of each. If you work for a nonprofit, it's likely you won't be paid as much, and some people need to be paid more. So a lobbyist position would be more likely a better fit. Think tanks also pay very well for that type of work. Government agencies in the United States, they pay a fair wage, so it's usually livable. It's not clicking. Okay, there we go. So a bit of my experience, and just the experience of others, is I think there's an overlap between law and policy, and I think it really is beneficial to be able to actually read a law and understand the wording and understand the intent and understand the legislative history and understand all the components so that you can make policies that are relevant to the public, but also to fulfilling the law. Some attorneys pursue policy careers where they apply the legal analysis skills they learn in law school to advocate for political causes. They draft bills for legislators, craft regulations for government agencies, or provide policy commentaries for think tanks, nonprofits, and for-profits consulting groups. Occasionally, attorneys with an interest in policy become professional lobbyists for trade associations or larger corporations. So my experience, I basically mentioned it before, is that there's a lot of diversity among policymakers. There's scientists, so at the EPA, the science I do influences policy. I say, I find out something through my research, I present it to policymakers, and then they evaluate, okay, so to what extent do we want to incorporate this science? What part is gonna fulfill the laws? And so that's important. But then I worked with lawyers, and I think it was an accountant, and they also were important because they had to there's budgets related to policy about, they have to calculate the cost that it will be for industry to carry out the policies and the laws. So that's important, and the statistics of it too. We had to calculate what type of population would be most affected by the policy. Would it be Black people, white people, Mexicans? We had to calculate that out. And would it be poor people, rich people? So all of that, all of those skills come into play. If you're interested in policy, there are a lot of different roles for you. And that's it. Okay.
Hey,
Now questions.
yes. So anyone who want to ask question directly to Ms. Jocelyn? Anyone, please?
Izin, sir.
Okay, Satriani.
Thank you very much for your
Okay, silakan.
material. I have a question about laws and policies have an important role in environmental protection and management. In what position do you think the law could be a part of, or what aspect can support for succeed implementation? Thank you.
So you said what role can the local?
I see. Laws and policy have an important role in environmental protection and management. In what position do you think the law could be a part of, or what aspect can support for succeed implementation?
So the law provides for the enforcement of the policy. So it's not the policy itself, but policy says, how can I carry out that law? And law says, this is what needs to happen. And when it says this is what needs to happen, there are consequences for not making it happen. And so law enforcement, not just the police, but the courts, judges, and everything get involved, and they enforce the laws. So the laws have a lot of power, and they are enforceable, and you get punished for them. Policies, not the same way, unless they're demonstrating something that is punishable by law. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So anyone else want to ask directly? It's not everyday chance that we have Miss Jocelyn here, and then you can ask question directly. Okay, so while waiting the others, so let me, or can you describe the CERCLA, Jocelyn? I mean, CERCLA is quite significant because it's to some extent then we can call it the Superfund Act, right? Because it also imposed to the third party that guarantee property, even as if there is a pollution in this in that property. Yeah, even though they didn't know, didn't realize, because it's only some mortgage and others. So what is the actual implementation of this circular, and then to some extent is that always construction with the policy, the common policy of the, yeah, I mean the government and the states, also on the states policy?
Yeah, so CERCLA is so basically what happens typically is that industry or any party, it could be an individual too on their own, will often dump or leak a chemical, and it will literally seep into the land, and sometimes it goes into the air, or it can go in the water. And when it reaches levels that go against the laws, like the laws might permit a certain level, like 1,000 part per million, but then they found out it's 1 part per million at this particular industry site. Then when they find out that, CERCLA is enforced by the EPA. So the EPA will come in, and typically a civil suit results. So there will be a case formed, and it will go to the legal courts. And the policy to meet the goal of the law of, say, 1 part per million maximum, it has described ways to dispose of your waste properly. So it has a method, it details how to get rid of your waste properly in a way that will not harm the environment. So when you don't follow those policies and you harm the environment and you violate the law by going above 1 ppm, then the EPA enforces it, and a civil lawsuit, typically civil, but it can also be criminal, because pollution does have the ability to cause harm and cancer, and it will, if it does cause it, it will definitely have the potential for criminal lawsuit. But pretty much always there is a civil lawsuit, and that civil lawsuit under CERCLA, what it usually includes is the fine for the act, as well as the cleanup of the site. So they have to clean up and rejuvenate the whole site, and that can be a really long process. But they have to go through, and they have to make sure that it's below the level that the law requires. So again, civil lawsuits could also have criminal, depending upon the effects. But even with the if it causes cancer and stuff, sometimes that results in civil lawsuits where they have to pay the harmed party money and not necessarily someone going to jail. So
Okay, yeah, that's give us a clear description, a brief description on it. So I have another question. This came from Sandy, one of the student, but
Okay.
he cannot ask directly because yeah, he's on the on the way. So he
Okay.
asking about how the problem of law and public policy relation between the federal government in US and the state. I mean, of course, states have so many diversity, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then to some extent, of course, the federal and state also have significant power. I mean, compared to Indonesia, we have decentralization that's quite different with the federal and states relationship. So how this policy and the law relation between especially in environmental law between federal and states. Okay.
Yeah, so the federal laws must be enforced. And so at the state level, what they end up doing is they go, okay, so we have to enforce these laws. Then they write public policies that will help them carry out the laws at their particular location. Because each state has different characteristics, how the law will be carried out can be very different. And so the public policy can also be quite different between them. Um, so yeah, so that's how they deal with it. And when the state violates the federal laws, there is punishment for it too, because some states aren't enforcing laws the way that they're supposed to.
Okay.
And so when that happens, there's punishment, fines, and also the federal government might move in to regulate directly. Like the EPA might start to enforce some of the laws directly if the state government hasn't done it correctly. So
Okay. So it's a second line enforcement then
yeah,
the mechanism of
Mhm.
EPA. So
yeah,
does EPA also? I mean, in this from your description. So it's mean EPA is authority body that's in yeah authority body from federal, and then is it also have the enforcement and as well as the executioner uh, power authority directly or
yes.
okay.
Yes, it does. So because they write the laws, so the states are supposed to enforce those federal laws, but there are federal policing policies. So like if it's something criminal and it crosses the border between states, we have the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. When it crosses boundaries, they're the ones that investigate. And then the EPA, they investigate all the CERCLA work that we're talking about. All of that, the EPA does that. And they work with state governments oftentimes to do that, but the EPA is there enforcing. So a lot of the federal agencies have a part of the agency that is for enforcement.
Okay, so does EPA also have their own enforcers? I mean, like EPA is like the FBI, right? But for environmental matters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But it,
Not all of the EPA does that. That's just part of the
yeah, yeah,
EPA.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Uh-huh.
mean, does also EPA has their own enforcer, or they
Yeah.
need to coordinate with FBI?
No, typically they have their own enforcers.
Okay, and
So
their
I'm
authority.
guessing I don't know about the FBI, but I'm guessing maybe it might happen sometimes, but I don't know about that part of it. I just know we have our own enforcers.
But their power is similar with FBA. I mean, when
Yeah.
EPA officer, EPA enforcers goes to states, and then they can say that state you stop your activities is already on our, we are in charge like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
They can go and like, if they hear about something. But I do want to emphasize a lot of times the EPA, the federal EPA, will work with the state governments.
Okay.
Even if the state government hasn't done something correctly, they tend to work with them because each state has its own environmental agency usually.
Okay, is that so?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not directly what it hierarchy direct with EPA. It's different.
It's like there's the EPA and then
Yeah.
there's the state agencies. That diagram that I showed you with the ranking.
Yes.
So there's federal and then there's state and provincial. And so the federal, we have enforcers there, but we pass those federal laws onto the state laws. And so the state laws are enforced too at the state level. In the US, that's how it works.
Yeah.
So the states have their own agencies. They have health agencies, environmental agencies. They have their own agencies that are there to help carry out the federal laws. But also, like I was saying, some of the states are stricter. So the states that are stricter, they enforce even more. They enforce stricter rules.
Okay. So so it means it doesn't have the state agency. It doesn't have the direct hierarchy to the EPA.
I mean, it's under it.
Oh, it's under it.
Under it. Yeah. So it's not like I'm part of the US EPA.
Yes. Okay.
It's not like that. But it's like they follow the federal laws.
Yes, of course, yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's for example, so Alabama could have a different name of agency rather than California, for example, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so thank you. And then
yeah, they have different names a
yes,
lot.
okay. So it's not like Alabama EPA and then like Texas EPA is different, right?
Yeah, they can have different names. California is called Cal EPA.
Okay.
And the federal EPA is called the US EPA.
US EPA. Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So here goes another question from Nur Rahma. So she asking about is there any idea or any case that an environmental case and then it's create the damage that could be considered as state damage, and it's damaging the environmental finance. Sorry, the state's finance, state finance. So, could it be considered as a corruption in US?
If it damages if they're fined, if the state is fined, is that what is being asked?
No. If an environmental case then created damage that can be considered to costing the money from the state money, right? So for example, just let's talk about for example, about the New Mexico Bay, right? The Mexico Gulf Stream, then this environmental degradation on that area, forcing the government, the state government, to spending a lot of money, or perhaps that could be different because different case because the polluter is known. How about in the orphan damage? Does or can environmental, sorry, let me make it simple. Can an environmental damage can considered as a pollution if then this is make the states became deficit with their budgeting?
So, so where it would be corruption is if the state itself was polluting. If the state was polluting and they knew that they were polluting, that would be corruption.
Okay.
If the state has to contribute to the cleaning up of the pollution, then that part wouldn't be corruption so much. That would just be that they're helping clean it up because someone is liable. Someone in the government is liable.
Okay.
But yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean it's corruption so much as neglect and lack of knowledge. But sometimes it is corruption. Sometimes they know that it's wrong and they still pollute anyways.
But
So,
but does the corruption law falls against those environmental crimes also?
So corruption, that's interesting. Yeah, that probably would be one of the charges that the person would have if it was corruption. It would probably be a charge. Yeah. I don't know all the charges that they name when they take them to civil court and criminal court. It really depends upon the case. So, but that possibly could be one if it's a government offense and everything. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Okay. So there's another question, Jocelyn. So it came from Azima. So she asking about which factor with interest. I mean, there will be a lot of interest that going in the discussion of regulation, especially in the environmental regulation. I mean, we can say about the interest of the company, the interest of the government, and which one is most significantly considered in the U.S. Development of law and policy in the environmental matters. I mean, it is goes to. I mean, is there any significant regulation that more supporting the industry rather than the people or rather than the environment?
This is sticky. So I have to say, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Environmental Protection Agency.
Yes.
Do not take this as the word of the US EPA. So again, how I mentioned politics comes into play. So right now, the government has allowed for they've pulled back on the policies that enforce certain laws. They're not being as strict about the enforcement of certain laws. They're saying, oh, it doesn't have to be done that way. And so it's allowing for industry to pollute more. So, but again, that's part of policy making too. Okay. Someone for the industry probably lobbied and said, oh, lessen this law, don't enforce this one as much, blah blah. A policymaker probably did that, and they convinced politicians to go to the agencies and get them not to do the policies a certain way. So politics is definitely involved in laws and policy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it depends upon who's leading.
So, and then my personal question, between President Trump and the previous President Obama, which one do you think more support on the environment?
I think I'm not supposed to talk about the presidents.
Okay.
I'm not supposed to be political.
But I mean, I think, or just let me make this easier question. I mean, I always teach to my student that EPA, EPA and the agency, as well as the EPA and the Environmental Policy Act, Environmental Policy Act, and the NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, that has been is a part of the Constitution as what is milestone development in the environmental law, right? So from your point of view itself, during this year, along this year, if you need to give a point between 1 to 10, to what number do you think the environmental protection and environmental management is going well in the US?
I don't know if I should answer that. I don't know if I should. I am a government official, so I don't. I
mean, if you say that, well, we are proud enough to say that we have 8 to 9 like that, so that will be fine for us. Because
I'm not going to say that. No, we'll just leave it. I don't want to do that one. That's too. It has politics. Yes.
Because it's very important for me, because as I said before, I always consider as NEPA and EPA and CERCLA is one of the good example, very best example for talking when we're talking about the environmental regulation. The Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, going together in that.
There's a lot of great laws, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. How much they're enforced, that's
the other question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But I definitely think in general, even when they're less enforced, it's still probably more than most countries.
Yes, indeed. Agree.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so anyone else? Anyone want to speak directly to Ms. Jocelyn here? Let me, or do you think that I need to just point my fingers to one of you to talk, because several of them also came from another international class. I mean, the environmental international class is already for last week, but this is another class. So which one? Anyone?
Izin bertanya, Pak.
Okay, please.
I will ask in English. So I just wondering how U.S. president election affect the environmental policy in U.S. and among Trump and Biden. Can you explain to us how the two candidates offer the environmental policy to the United States of America? Thank you.
Another tricky question from Fadil. But perhaps Jocelyn can answer.
I can answer the first part.
Based on the program between Biden and Trump, which one has the better program for environment?
No, I don't know if I can answer that one. I can answer what happens when we change presidents.
Okay, yeah.
When we change presidents, depending upon the Congress also, you have to, so in the US, for a law to pass, you have to have the House of Representatives and the Senate, they both have to pass the law. And then it goes to the president, and the president has to sign off on the law. So we call it checks and balances. So there's 3 parts to the government there that have to approve the law. So there's that. And so each election, all three of those things can change. So depending, like we've had one of the most inactive Congresses, House of Representatives and Senates, because they've been torn between two parties, between the Democrats, one's Democratic and one's Republican. And so they're not approving things sometimes, or like when they do that, but it's just, they're torn. And so not a lot of new laws are being made. Now, when the president changes how policies are written and carried out, that can change based upon his political interests, and what lobbyists are doing at the time. But yeah, so that can change, and it depends upon the policy. I can say that if Biden were president, it is highly likely more environmental policy would be more stringent.
Okay. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for
Mhm.
your. Okay. So another, please, Ariel. Would you like to ask directly? Ariel,
Yes, yes,
okay.
please.
So, please.
First of all, I would like to apologize if this might come across a bit unrelated to the topic, but I was a bit intrigued about one of your previous answers with respect to other public bodies which has overlapping jurisdiction with the EPA. With respect to this, I did some prior research in the past about another public body, another federal body in the United States, which is the FERC and SEC, in which they have overlapping jurisdiction and how such issues of overlapping jurisdiction might be settled. I'm also aware that, for example, the EPA and the FDA and the USDA has overlapping jurisdiction. So my first question would be, has there been any issue with respect to overlapping jurisdiction between the EPA and, for example, other federal bodies? And second of all, if there are such overlapping, such issues with respect to overlapping jurisdiction, how has the EPA and other such federal bodies addressed the issue? Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so there have been issues between different federal bodies. The first thing that happens is you get a working group. So you have a group from the different agencies that will negotiate and talk through the things. And they try to establish who has authority in that case, or how to incorporate all the different laws. If there is a problem with the laws as to whose law is supposed to be enforced, then these cases can go to court. That's where the judge looks at the laws and determines, okay, in this situation, these laws were intended the most, or they're the most valid. So it would go to court. Yeah, they go to court. It happens in order to sort it out. It's another one of our checks and balances. It's a way to, because the attorneys for each agency, they can try to sort out the laws, but if there's just a deep disagreement about them, then it would go to court for a judge to talk about or to determine.
Okay.
Good question.
So, okay, thank you. Ariel, do you think you have all the answer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so please, Audrey, for the next question.
Yes, thank you, Mas Yuyun. As you have stated, Ms. Jocelyn, state must comply with federal laws. But for my current knowledge, every state has its own Supreme Court. Then it is possible from each different Supreme Court in it to make different decisions regarding the law that has been disputed or so. That's my questions.
Yeah, so what happens is there's the federal law, like I said, that's the big overarching law that people are supposed to follow and that the states are supposed to follow and they have public policies for. But then also California is probably the best example because on pretty much all laws they they have gone beyond what the federal laws require. So I think they were among the first to say you can't smoke at a restaurant, and the federal law didn't say that. And then also they, for environmental laws, they're a lot stricter. They just wrote into law a mandate saying that all cars have to be electric, all new cars have to be electric by a certain year. The federal law does not require that, but they have decided to enforce this law. And the federal government in the United States, because it believes in independence of these states and the ability of them to live upon, like based upon their own values that come with these states, it's kind of embracing the diversity of the United States by letting each state determine some things. They're going to be able to enforce it. However, there are calls to the US EPA administrator is trying to go against California doing the electric vehicle mandate. And so if that becomes an issue, there's going to be negotiations at first, probably. But if it continues, if he remains in office, it might go to court. So if there's an issue between the state laws and the federal laws, if there's some type of problem, it goes to court. And so it can start off at a low level of court and then work its way up to the Supreme Court if it's big enough. So yeah, like there's issues between what the states want sometimes and what the federal government wants. We automatically know that if the state has a law that is lesser than the federal government, then the state's going to be in trouble. Like that's automatic. But when a state has a more stringent law, that can be controversial sometimes. And there can be a lot of agency trying to work with the state and try to figure it out, or they go to court about it. I was thinking there was another instance of marijuana. So marijuana in California became legal. It's technically illegal in the federal government. The federal government is not doing anything really to enforce the law of it being illegal. So there's a likelihood that it will become a legal substance in the United States federally as well, because other states have also made it recreational marijuana use. They have also made it legal. So that's part of how, like in the United States, when states start to make laws and there's a wave of laws being made, it influences the federal laws. That's what that chart I was saying, it was saying the lower levels, they're not gonna force the federal government to follow them, but they can influence what becomes federal law. And so, yeah, it's interesting.
But Jocelyn, is there any direct or strict regulation that defines something that should be generalized? And then, I mean, there'll be no change from the state's law to regulate differentially, or it's only based on the policy?
The states, they make laws.
I mean,
so the states.
Is there any strict differentiation or strict definition or strict separation between things that that you can manage, I mean state law can manage and the federal law can manage? Or for example, you mentioned about the marijuana. I mean, in perhaps in Texas, in another is it's legal, right? But in
It's
federal,
not legal.
it's not legal.
Texas is not legal.
Okay, so
California it's legal.
in California it's legal, but in federal it is illegal. So I mean, is there any commodities or any issues that should not be regulated differently between states and federal, or it's only like based on the policy? For example, because marijuana is quite to some extent commodity, right? Economic commodity.
Yeah.
And then so federal states didn't do anything about it.
Yeah. No, states that have it are making a lot of money off of it. And so it's been very beneficial because of the taxation that's on it. So to legalize it, and also it makes it in some cases, it's easier to monitor when it's legalized. So yeah, it's interesting, but I'm not really sure how, like, I haven't ever heard of the federal government trying to intervene and do anything different about it, you know? And so I'm not sure what the federal government has decided enforcement wise.
Okay. Is there any environmental issues that quite difficult enough to agree between states and federal? I mean, it has been discussed along these years, and then until today is not settled yet.
I have to think about that. I know there must be with California, because California, their laws are much more progressive. So,
Yes.
So I'm from California originally. So, but like their laws are so much more progressive. So I'm pretty sure there must be something that has been an issue, because we read about it all they'll read, okay, they did this and the EPA doesn't agree. And so then they go to court. And so there's all these smaller issues that have come up because they're so further ahead and they're so much stricter. And some people say they're actually an example for the EPA, for the US EPA. So,
I think like in climate change, California, like when Governor Schwarzenegger, rule is there.
Yeah.
So many progressive laws on climates compared to the federals.
Yeah, and he was a Republican, a party that in the rest of the United States does not typically do that. So, but he was for California, so California is much more progressive. So, but and the state Congress.
What kind of topic that quite a hot issue right now about environment in nowadays in US?
So PFAS, I don't know if you've heard of it, polyfluorinated alkyl substances.
Okay.
Sulfites. So they're chemicals that last in the environment a long time.
Okay.
And their effects are not clearly known, but they last such a long time, they're getting into our bodies too. So they're in the water, they're in everything. And you can find them. They were the non-stick pans. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Teflon case.
Yeah, Teflon. Yes.
The dark water.
So they were used to make Teflon and stuff. And the PFOA is a type of PFAS. And that resulted in the release of PFAS. When they made that, The company that made it released it into some water and it spread. And so, and thinking about in other countries that aren't as regulated, those chemicals spread even more because there was no one to stop them from doing it in industry. Yeah. But if you look it up, PFAS, it's a very hot topic. We get a lot of funding for it because they're trying to make sure, like they want to stop it if it's going to kill people, you know, and if it's going to cause cancers. There are signs that it does, but they're still working on it to get more information.
Okay. Yes, I think I asked the student to watch Dark Waters in this semester. I already asked them to watch Dark Waters.
Dark Waters?
Yes. You haven't heard it. It's it's a movie, last year movie, and the star is Mark Ruffalo.
Okay.
And then it talk about the Teflon DuPont. Pollution.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. PFOS. Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's that one is PFOA, but it's a type of PFAS.
PFSS. So it's more complex then.
Here, let me write it real fast. So PFAS.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you look it up, you'll see, and there's a bunch of different chemicals that fall in that category, and it's very hot topic right now. Okay. So I worked with sea turtles related to them because the PFOA is the one that comes from Teflon, was accumulating in them. And so we were looking at it and we noticed it was causing cell death. Yeah, so it's toxic. So, and the reason it's so bad is because it stays in the system. It doesn't go away very easily. And when a chemical does that, it's like, that's dangerous.
Yes, indeed. The dangers of the Minamata syndrome then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jocelyn. So, any question else? Anything else? It's already 7:30 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there is no other questions, I think we already have very fruitful and very hot discussion right tonight.
Yeah, it was good.
Thank you also for Jocelyn for her bravery to say that Joe Biden is quite supporting more on the environment than the Trump president right now.
I did not.
It's me. Don't worry about that, Jocelyn. Okay, so thank you so much, Jocelyn, for sharing with us tonight, and I hope we still have the chance to have another guest speaker for another opportunity, another time. And there's no other thing that we would like to say other than thank you, and we are so grateful to have you in these 2 weeks. And thank you so much for all the share, and thank you so much for Natalie from the International Law School Association for letting us to have this discussion, and very fruitful discussion tonight. And I think that's all, guys. Thank you so much for your coming in this meeting, and always keep you healthy. And also for you, Jocelyn, have a nice weekend, have a nice days for you, and then I hope to have another discussion with you.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay,
thank you. Okay, so please be in touch. If you want me to do like clean air, clean water, I could do those too.
Okay, sure, Jocelyn. I'll let you know about that.
Okay, got it.
So thank you all. So let me close tonight's discussion. So terima kasih Terima kasih is thank you for bahasa.
Okay, thank you. Okay, nice.
Oke, terima kasih. So, selamat
Good
malam.
night.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oke.